And let's remember, this is just about players, college athletes, being able to make money on the side. Right now, players get nothing, no share of money in the billions of dollars that college sports generates from TV and streaming rights. Right now, none of that TV goes to the players. Compare that to the NFL and the NBA, for instance, where the TV revenue, those big multi-billion-dollar deals with the networks, that revenue is split roughly evenly between the owners and the players. Revenue sharing is going to come to college sports. How it happens, right? Unionization, by conference, we don't know. But what happens to all of that TV money is going to be the next big battle. That said, we're still working out the rules of the road for NIL. So, who's going to write those rules of the road? Should it be the federal government? I sat down with the former Massachusetts governor and current president of the NCAA, Charlie Baker, who does want Congress to step in. And I began by asking him why.
Well, I think the first thing is you now have over 30 states that have written their own rules around how NIL would work, which is not just a challenge for us in terms of creating a level playing field around how name, image, and likeness should work for student athletes and for schools, but it's also almost impossible for conferences to manage because most conferences involve multiple states. Mm-hmm. So the feds, we can put rules in place, and if everybody chooses to abide by them, that may in fact work, but it would certainly be simpler if the feds just said, we're going to have one set of rules around NIL.
Well, what does that mean? Does it mean designation of these players as employees or not employees?
No,
what is it exactly?
Okay, for me, what I would really like, right now there are no rules around how name, image, and likeness works. And for your audience, that's the opportunity for student athletes to benefit from their name, image, and likeness and their you know, their number of followers, their presence in their communities, and all the rest. And it's, my opinion, it is and can and should be a really good thing for student athletes. It's mostly about what I would describe as the top end of college sports. There's not a lot of name, image, and likeness going on in D2 and D3 and in parts of D1. But where it is going on, it's a positive development. But there's no uniform standard contract, which would exist if you were buying a house or buying a stock or anything else. The brokers and agents that operate in this space don't have to sign anything that says they work for the customer, which in this case would be the student athlete. We don't really have what I would describe as any kind of market signals for student athletes and their families around what in theory they might be worth. And so the traditional consumer protections that exist in almost every other financial walk of life in this country don't exist for student athletes and families in this space.
And the other issue that seems to be out there is that some states have allowed public universities to work with these collectives, these boosters. Some states have tried to create some sort of distance. And frankly, schools aren't sure what the rules are because they're not sure what your rules are because of all of this.
We've done the best we can to provide them with guidance, right? But the bottom line is the thing the NCAA...
How quickly guidance turns into a compliance issue is what scares them.
Well, but guidance is also guidance. It's like at 40,000 feet. What people want is something that looks more like a rule. And so my view is, I haven't been there for that long, but my view here is what we need to do is create rules around how we're going to protect student athletes, create rules around institutional involvement, which is the issue you just asked about there, and create some rules around recruiting. Because those are the things that are putting a lot of student athletes and families and schools in complicated positions.
Is it your preference that the institutions be allowed to essentially sanction NIL groups?
If we go down that road, then I want the collectives and those institutions to comply with Title IX, which means, you know, instead of spending 99% of their money on men and 1% of their money on women, they got to spend half of it on women.
What is the line anymore between amateur athlete and professional athlete when you play for a university?
Well, first of all, you're 99% of the student athletes who, 100% in the vast majority of schools are never playing. So point number one is they need to get an education, get a degree, and launch for their life, right? That's the point. And for most schools and most student athletes, and I say this as a former athlete from a family of former athletes, the lessons you learn playing sports, you can apply across the rest of your life. And it's an enrichment for all intents and purposes. And most schools lose money on sports. And what we're talking about here, I think, are what I think of as the 50 or 60 or 70 programs that are just dramatically different than all the rest, of which there are 1,000.
This has been talked about a long time. Would your job be a lot easier? Could you make rules that applied to all of these institutions if you essentially said, all right, Power 5, or I guess now we're looking at a Power 4, you're over here, you're a league, maybe we even get an antitrust exemption and manage it over here, and we'll oversee the real amateur sports over here?
I certainly believe that we should come up with some sort of a model in which we think differently about those schools than others. I mean, think about it this way. Those 50 or 60 schools, the smallest of them has like $100 million athletic budget, right? The vast majority.
It's astonishing.
But the vast majority.
And what is the gap after that? Like, what, you go from 100 million to what? Like,
2/3 of the D1 schools are under 50, and the D2 and D3 schools, of which there are of our 1,100 institutions, over 600 of them are D2 and D3, and they teach all the same lessons that the big boys and girls teach. And I would say that for them, you're talking athletic budgets that are 10, 12, 15 million, 5 million. I mean, it's a service they provide. And so for me, the way we should be thinking about this is, what are we going to do with the schools that represent the 100 million and up, and then how do we think about the rest?
Is it as simple as peeling off a sport, football, or do you think it's more peeling off the schools?
Well, keep in mind that football, for the most part, at those schools, pays for women's sports, Olympic sports, huge parts of the rest of their athletic programs, which I think everybody values and appreciates. I don't think it's an easy thing to solve, but I think it's absolutely a must solve.
Well, let me ask the question this way then. Do you think those 50 schools should have more of a responsibility to work within a system that doesn't crush the others?
I think the answer is you have to be willing. First of all, I've met with all 97 conferences since I started, and I only started in March. A lot of them said it's the first time they've ever seen or talked to the NCAA president. And one of the questions I asked everybody was, how should we be thinking about this question that you're raising? And most people don't know what the answer is. We need to figure that out. But they do agree that that group is operating on a different platform and in a different model than everybody else, and we need to figure that out.
You were a governor for quite a bit of time.
During a pandemic.
A state legislature is difficult. University presidents. I've talked to university presidents who were governors, Mitch Daniels, who you know.
Yeah, sure.
And he will say it was tougher dealing with a faculty senate than the state senate. Give me a comparison between dealing with a legislature and dealing with university presidents.
Well, the biggest difference is scale. I mean, I dealt with 200 legislators and 50 mayors and a few hundred city managers as governor, and a lot of advocates, okay? The NCAA has 180 committees, and there are, roughly 10 or 12 people.
I don't think Congress has 180 committees.
Yeah, it's a very big and complicated structure. The architecture is very big and complicated. And
should it be? Would you have built it this way?
I think, look, I got to put some points on the board on some other things, but at some point I am going to want to have a conversation with the membership about whether what we have here is actually the way in the 21st century, where things happen like this, to be able to make decisions, because we have definitely been, the NCAA has definitely been slow to move on a lot of things, and it's created real issues for student athletes and for the membership.
You got a tough job. College sports is something people are very passionate about, and it can be such a unifying force. So I think that's why some of us care so much, because it's like, as everything else frays in society, we got to keep this as a glue.
The other thing to remember here, Chuck, is it is the most powerful human potential development machine we have, and it's uniquely American. And I and so many people I know have benefited from it. And that is the reason I took the job when I could have done some other stuff.
Good luck.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
It's good to see you.
Nice to see you.
Thanks for watching. Stay updated about breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app, or follow us on social media.